In this assignment, I'm going to show you how to make a plate of food from clay. Here is an example of a plate of food that I made. I have some pie, fruit, ice cream, and you can see it's all attached to my plate. And this is the plate that I created. And another example I have is my bacon, eggs, toast, and lemon wedge. And again, it's attached, and the plate is handmade as well. So in this part one of the lesson, I'm going to be explaining how to create a plate using a mold. And the supplies you're going to need are a rolling pin, clay, a clay mat to roll your clay on, a water cup, a fettling knife, wet paper towels, a plate for the mold, and a rib tool. So the first thing you're going to begin with is setting up your mat. It's a canvas mat, and you're going to get some clay out of the clay bin. You're going to want to make sure that it's large enough for the plate that you're going to be creating. This is the plate that I'm going to create. So I'm just using this as a mold to get the shape for my plate. So what you want to do is you want to, first of all, prepare your clay. And to prepare the clay, you need to do what's called wedge the clay. Wedging the clay is a process that removes air from the clay and makes the clay all one nice continuous piece of clay so that there's no wet and dry areas. It's all the same moisture and it's all the same consistency. So the first thing I want to do is push down on the clay. I lift it on its end. I push down. And by doing this, I'm removing air bubbles that are inside the clay. I've already pre-wedged this before I started the video, so I'm not going to wedge mine for too long. Most likely you'll have to wedge yours for 40 or 50 times. You're going to press it down 40 or 50 times to get the air out. If I were to cut this in half and look, I can see whether I have removed the air. And you can see there's a giant air hole right here. That's a big air pocket. There's little air pockets. So I have not wedged the clay enough. So I'm going to smack the clay back together, and I'm going to continue to wedge. Pressing it down, lift it up. When I'm wedging, I want to make sure I don't fold the clay over on itself because it will trap air. Instead, I need to practice just pushing it straight down. And you definitely want to stand while you're doing this because it does require a bit of muscle. Once you feel that it's wedged enough, I would cut it open again and check if I were you. I'm not going to be too concerned because mine's just a demonstration. But you want to make sure there's no air because if there is, it has a chance of breaking in the kiln. Because the hot air, the air in the clay becomes hot with the heat. The kiln reaches almost 2,000 degrees. And when air heats up, it expands. And it's going to try to get out of the clay. And it would make a hole to do so. So once you've wedged it, the next thing to do is to just press it down. Don't make any of it any skinnier than your pinky because that will be too thin. You flip it, press it, and then take a rolling pin and starting in the middle, push out, away, and then pull it back towards me. Do not go to the very edges of the clay because it'll make it too thin. You can rotate your clay and then roll it out, away from you, and then towards you. I see an air bubble. Looks like a blister coming up. I'm just going to pop it. There's another one right here. I'll pop it. So what I want to do is make sure that my plate can fit on the clay. Looks like it can just about fit. However, I feel like my clay is a little too thick still. I'm just going to roll it out a bit more. And that looks like a good fit. Next, I'm going to use this little tool called a rib tool. This is really flexible rubber thing. And I'm going to dip it in water. And I'm just going to go across my clay with it to smooth out my clay. You might want to add a little extra water on there. It's going to smooth the clay, and it's also going to compress the little particles of the clay together, and that's going to make it stronger. So doing this while your clay is still flat is very helpful. This is called a slab of clay. We're making a clay slab plate. A slab is just a very flat piece of clay. And then use water and just smooth it up. If it seems like it's too high in the middle, you're going to just want to roll that out a little bit longer. You can also use a little sponge to smooth your surface. The next thing to do is to trace your plate that you chose for your mold. So put that on the clay. You can trace it out first, or you can just cut it all at once. This is called a fettling knife. It has a sharp edge that's like kind of serrated here, and then it has this other edge that's not as sharp. You want to use the sharper edge. Hold the knife straight up and down. Just go along the edge of the plate, all the way through the mat, to the mat, and remove your scraps. Next, you're going to want to take the wet paper towels that you've gotten. I have 2 wet paper towels because that's how many I will need to cover this plate. And what those are going to be used for is to create a barrier between the plate and my clay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take, I think my clay is a little thick, but I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take my wet paper towels, lay them down on the plate. Make sure that the plate is entirely covered with the paper. Then you'll just put your hand under the canvas, put your other hand on top of the clay. You can flip it and remove the canvas. And then you'll just go ahead and place this into your clay mold, your plate mold. And then once you've done that, go ahead and just use a little bit of water with your fingers, smooth it out, pressing it down so it's really fitting in that plate. Smooth out the edges. So over here, I'm just smoothing this out with water with my finger. All these edges, smooth them out. Just going to grab a sponge real quick. This thing looks like a rip tool, but when you put it in water, it kind of becomes a sponge. Sorry, I didn't have this ready ahead of time. It's absorbing the water right now. So this can be used to really smooth your surface. Or you could just use your fingers, whatever you think works best. You're going to leave your clay on the plate, probably overnight would be fine, until the clay can keep its own shape, and then you'll remove it from the clay dish or the ceramic dish, and then you'll start adding your food onto it, which I will show you in the next video, how to make clay food. So this is how to make a clay plate. Remember in the beginning, I showed you a materials list so you know what you need to gather before you begin. Before you put it away, I want you to put your name on a sticky note and put it with your plate so I can keep them identified. I can make sure that I have them labeled so that they don't get mixed up. And that's how to make the clay plate.